Starmer throws down gauntlet to watchdogs with growth edict. So I don't think it's going to work. I could give the Labour government, the UK government, advice for free if they wanted. I'm here, and they can contact me, and I wouldn't charge them anything. It's really simple. Monday, December 30th, 2024, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Looks like Prime Minister Starmer is panicking. He's even asked the regulators to come up with a plan for economic growth, and it's going to fail, of course. This collapse has been brewing for years, and I've been warning about it, of course, for almost 4 years about UK economic collapse. We're going to look into that, of course, today, and what's happening this morning already in the markets. We're seeing some interesting moves in the gilt market or the UK government bond market. Before I start, though, just wanted to warn the viewers that I never give out WhatsApp numbers in the comment section. I never ask people to contact me with ideas to make money. And there are a lot of bots there impersonating me in the comment section. So beware of that. I never do that. And I never do it either on Twitter or X. My handle on Twitter or X is @Monaco1964. I've got about 21,000 followers. So be very careful. There are scammers out there trapping people, messaging them, and luring them into scams. So just wanted to let you all know about that. So for those of you who are new to the channel, you might be saying, well, yes, we all know that the UK economy is collapsing. You see a lot of stories, of course, young people especially on YouTube. They're planning to leave the UK. They're desperate. Rich people want to leave the UK. I mean, I saw this video the other day. Young guy, I want to leave the UK ASAP. Sheffield City Centre video. And there are many others of people going around seaside towns, boarded up shops, and all of that. So what's going on? Where do I think lies the roots of this current economic collapse? Well, I could go back very far. I could go back to the World War I period and the fact that this country went from having 600 million in national debt to 7 billion. But I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to go just far back enough, I think, for people to realize that it's not Brexit, it's not immigrants, it's not a shortage of housing that's the problem. It's the monetary system, it's all the debt, and especially it's the response to 2008. And back in 2008, of course, I was expecting a collapse. I had already started putting some of my savings outside the system. And what do I mean by that? Well, I had already started stacking gold and silver, and I was ready for it. I was working in the city, and what they did, and by they I mean the government and the central bank, the Bank of England did, in response to the crisis, kept me working there for another 4 years. I have to admit that. But I was prepared for them to allow the whole thing to collapse. All the banks would have collapsed, but then the government would have collapsed. So they kicked the can down the road. They cut rates to zero for the next, let's say, almost 15 years. They printed almost £1 trillion of money out of thin air. And why did they do that? Well, it was the only way they could reliquify the banks. It was the only way they could keep house values elevated so people could afford their mortgages. And how do they do that? Well, all that money the government borrowed, that £1 trillion, went into the bank. Well, it was created by the Bank of England. What the Bank of England did was buy government bonds and keep yields low. But everything changed in 2020, 2021 because, lenders now want their pound of flesh. And yields or interest rates have been going up ever since. They've had enough. They realize that the government now has gotten too big. The debt is too big. And I'm not like blaming labor specifically since July. I'm blaming all of them because the Tories had 14 years to fix it and they didn't. They might as well be called labor as well. They weren't as bad, even though some would argue that Liz Truss screwed up, but they're screwing up even more now. And why is that? Well, because they think that socialism and Keynesianism are the solution. They did back in '08 because they bailed out the collapsing banking sector. They bailed out households that had debt up to here. All the people that had been frugal and had saved and had put some, be it fiat currency or gold and silver on the side, didn't have any debt. They were really punished, the savers, and they've been punished for over a decade. So unfortunately, this is what people have voted for. And I might sound a little bit harsh, but you get the government you deserve. And yes, there's a lot of brainwashing and a lot of lies from politicians, and people fall into the trap. But as I've always said, and it's one of the reasons why I don't care about politics, even though you have to follow it closely, is that you need to try to be self-reliant and self-sufficient and be outside the system as much as possible. Look at what they've done to the private pensions now. They're going after your private pensions through the inheritance tax. Look at what they've done to small businesses and farms with the inheritance tax. Unfortunately, that's what's happening. But also socialism in general, and I'm not talking here just about labor, because the Conservative Party that took over in 2010 was just a new labor light, or even just a new labor in a new suit, so to speak. So socialism, throttling the country. This is a poster from 1909 political campaign by the Conservative Party, and I've shown you this many times. And I think, unfortunately, that is the problem with the UK economy. Even people who are avowed conservatives, they think we need socialism. And by socialism, I mean the state interfering in our lives, be it in the health system, be it in the schools, be it in transportation. Socialism doesn't work. It's central planning. Central planning doesn't create competition. It doesn't create incentives. And unfortunately, I don't think Keir Starmer and his government are going to solve anything. They're just going to accelerate the collapse. The collapse of the UK economy, and that's going to come through the gilt market. So let's have a look at the gilt market and what investors now are saying. And this is huge news here. It came out on the 27th of December, so Friday, late on Friday, the story about JP Morgan Asset Management, the world's biggest bank. So the world's biggest investor in a way, in that they have a lot of wealthy clients that leave money with them to be managed. They're saying they're going to shun UK bonds over minimum wage fears. And we're going to look at what else Keir Starmer is doing in terms of the labor market, how he's really hurting the economy, not helping it. So there you go. This is huge news. And if you look this morning at the gilt market, it's quite early. It's 8:15 a.m. Yes, it's going to be a bit thinner. We're going into the New Year's Eve tomorrow, but it's still trading. I've got here the 10-year yield up another 5 basis points at 468. I've got the 30-year yield, gilt yield, the long-term 30-year gilt at 525. That's the highest since 1998. So that's how bad it is. Could we go higher? Is it impossible for us to see these long-term yields approach double digits? No, not really. When I started in the city of London, in the financial markets, back in the late 80s, early 90s, we had the double-digit rates for the long-term yield. So what's that going to do? Well, that's going to hurt the economy even more. That's going to hurt the government even more, because the government is up to here in debt. The average duration or length of time that the UK government debt is one of the highest, which means that a lot of the UK debt is from like 10 years or more, the average duration. Some countries have a lot shorter duration, which means that if long-term interest rates go up, it doesn't affect them much. It's good when interest rates are going down and are very low, that most of your debt is in long-term paper. But as I look here, it's 15 years. So it's a very long duration, average duration by international standards. So let's quickly have a look again. So for example, they've got a 15-year gilt here. It's yielding 5%. So it's going to permeate into the economy. It's going to make it even worse for households, because a lot of people have financing, not just mortgages, but everything else, like cars and credit cards. It's going to make it even worse. And this is happening because the budget that they delivered didn't really help the private economy. It punished the private economy at the expense. It helped the public sector at the expense of the private economy. And you can't have a healthy economy when the public sector, the bureaucracy is too big, because the public sector and the bureaucracy does not create wealth or value. It has to be taxed. So what are the solutions? I'm giving you all the problems here. Well, the solution is smaller government. It's, yes, less regulation. And do you think that the regulators that Keir Starmer is asking for ideas, and they have to come up with ideas by the middle of January for growth, do you think they're going to be any good in devising ways to grow the economy? No, regulators always do the opposite. It's like asking turkeys to come up with a reform program for Christmas. They're not going to tell people to buy more turkeys, right? They're gonna probably ban turkey from Christmas. Regulators are not gonna bend themselves. They're not gonna bend themselves, of course, from regulating in this case. So as you can see here, Starmer throws down gauntlet to watchdogs with growth edict. So I don't think it's gonna work. I could give the Labour government, the UK government, advice for free if they wanted. I'm here, and they can contact me, and I wouldn't charge them anything. It's really simple. And the first thing I would show them is this here: government spending as a percentage of GDP. And for the UK and the US, luckily, we've got it as far back as 1850. And you can see that up until 1910, the UK government spent at most 10% of GDP, and most of the time it was below 10%. But then came the war, of course, and that changed everything. As you can see here, nothing really improved. By 2000, of course, it had dropped, but we're back to 50%. So the government is spending more than the private economy. That's the whole problem. So how do you wean off the public from socialism? Well, it's difficult. I think it has to be gradual but it might be too late, unfortunately, because the whole house of cards is going to collapse anyway. I think what we need is the complete opposite. We need to go into a much smaller government. We need to let the economy free up. We need to let the private sector do whatever they want. We need to scrap regulators, not ask them how to grow the economy. And you might be asking, what about the people that depend on the state for welfare, for survival? Well, I think, yes, there's always room to help those people. How do we do that? Well, we stop allowing people to come in through the south coast of England on boats and paying them to live here like kings and queens. We stop that. We stop financing wars abroad. We stop. Well, another really important thing we need to stop is, and this is part of regulation, is this net zero climate change agenda. And this is not just labor that's doing it. Did you know that at the height of the '08 crisis back in September of 2008, it was pretty much the day that Lehman collapsed, UK Parliament almost unanimously passed the Climate Change Act of 2008. Yes, there were only 5 MPs who voted against it. So this is not just a labor thing, it's a whole UK establishment thing. We need to scrap all this net zero agenda, climate change, this scaremongering that the world's going to end and that we can do something about it. It's putting loads of costs on the economy, especially energy. We need to scrap that. That's part of the regulation. What else do we need to scrap? Well, this might be easier because this has just been passed recently here. And let me see if I can find it. Hold on. Oh yeah, new law from October 1st, 2024. It's called the Employment Rights Bill 2024. So when I came to live in the UK back in 1992, there was very little of these workers' rights. And what was good about that is that companies employed you on fully for, as an employee. You weren't employed part-time because there were no costs. But this is going to make things even worse. It's going to make the UK like countries like Spain, where it's really hard to fire workers. Then they just don't hire anyone. So unfair dismissal, protection from unfair dismissal from day one of employment. 0-hour contracts. Workers can request a guaranteed hours contract based on their average hours worked over a set of period. Leave. Paternity, parental, and bereavement leave from day one. Statutory sick pay. No waiting period for sick pay. No low earnings limit. Flexible working is the default unless the employer can prove it's unreasonable. I guess that's working from home. Fire and rehire, restricting the use of fire and rehiring practices. gender pay gap, menopause. Large employers will need to support employees through menopause. Collective redundancy consultation. So all these rules are going to make it even worse. It's not just the national insurance for employers that has been raised that's going to be the problem. I heard from someone I was playing golf with, who is a business owner, that when you interview a woman of childbearing age, you can't ask them if they're pregnant. So if you hire them and they start the next day, they could come and say, I'm expecting a child now, and you have to give them the maternity leave. It's crazy. What he told me is that, well, they're not going to hire young women. They're going to hire women above 50 or so, above the childbearing age. So it has the opposite effect. And that's what socialists do, unfortunately. So what else is going on in terms of making the economy even worse? Well, is to think that, the philosophy of Starmer, and it's even worse, of course, than the conservatives, is that you need a public sector that is booming, but a public sector really should be small and efficient. But when you're taking all the wealth from the private sector, you're going to kill the economy off. And I think this is it. Starmer and this Labour government is the trigger. We had been in a slow kind of malaise collapse since '08, but now it's accelerating. Could it all culminate in 2025? Very much possible. Am I negative? No, because, and I'm not saying this with glee, but I'm prepared for it. I've told the viewers here that I think paying off debt was the important thing. And people always used to say, some people, well, but interest rates are going to stay low forever. We can borrow and borrow. Well, look at where they're now. So what else? Have savings, which is something no one talks about anymore. And by savings, I mean real money, i.e. gold and silver. And you can see how gold and silver is helping now. We started the year at £1,600. We're now above £2,000. And in my opinion, the pound's going to continue to drop versus real money. And I think there are going to be opportunities there. There's going to be a lot of business failures. A lot of assets are going to collapse in price. Unfortunately, all the things we need to survive, the basic necessities, they're going to become more and more dear. That's the worst part of all this collapse. So there you go. That's what's going on. Unfortunately, not a really good message for the end of the year, but that's what it is. We have to go back to sanity. And what is sanity, in my opinion? Well, it's a small government that is there to administer the rule of law, and that this law is the same for everyone. It's a small government that doesn't tax you whatever you do. It doesn't tax you when you work. It doesn't tax you as much as the UK government is taxing people. You've seen the numbers there. 50%, more than 50% of GDP the government is spending. Well, they can only get that through taxing us. And more importantly, they need to scrap this climate change agenda, because everyone's waking up to it, that it's basically a control mechanism and a way to tax the general public. The rich, of course, they can offset carbon and keep doing whatever they want. So it's not really a climate or environmental crisis. It's more a power grab. And if you want to learn more about why the UK economy is in the state that it's in right now, I recommend you go through my playlist. I even have a playlist I started back in 2021 when I started warning about the UK economic collapse. I'm not doing this because I like this. I'm doing this because I could see it. I could see it because of the numbers and the monetary system, and I've been trying to warn people. And there you go. I'm gonna put it up here in the cards, the playlist. I'm gonna put it also in the description for you. So with that, I'm gonna wish you all a very good day. In terms of videos, I'm gonna make another one tomorrow, New Year's Eve. And yes, take care. Bye.